the rite of submission. The ceremonial blade hovered inches from my throat, its edge humming with a frequency tuned to Valkyrian physiology. Apparently, it worked just as well on humans. Kneel. The word rolled across the grand conclave hall like distant thunder. Crystal pillars towered above me, refracting violet light across polished onyx floors. Every noble of the Valkyrian stellar dominion stood in a perfect crescent, their silver lilac skin shimmering beneath banners woven from starlight. I was supposed to kneel. That was the rite of submission, a symbolic gesture, they claimed. A formality required of lesser species when granted audience on Velaris Prime. A tradition older than Earth's written history. I kept my spine straight. My diplomatic clearance does not require physical prostration, I said, forcing my voice not to shake. The treaty signed at first contact guarantees sovereign representation. A ripple of contemptuous laughter swept through the chamber. Lord Vareth, Supreme War Commander of the Third Fleet, stepped closer. His armor was ceremonial, etched with victories against civilizations humanity had never heard of. He pressed the humming blade nearer to my skin. "You are not sovereign," he said quietly. "You are tolerated." I could feel the heat of it now. One twitch, and it would sever artery and spine in a single stroke. 3 months on Velaris Prime had taught me one truth. Weakness was an invitation. "I represent Earth," I said, "and Earth does not kneel." The blade touched my throat. A thin line of warmth traced downward. Gasps echoed through the hall. On Velaris Prime, defiance was answered with blood, and I refused to bow. The blade never completed its arc. A single word shattered the moment. Enough. It did not echo. It resonated. The crystalline pillars surrounding the grand conclave hall vibrated as if struck by an unseen force. Light fractured through them in cascading waves of violet and gold. The humming edge at my throat flickered and died, its energy field collapsing into silence. Lord Vareth froze. Then, as one, every noble in the chamber dropped to their knees. Not gradually, not reluctantly, instantly. The shift was so sudden I nearly stumbled. The blade clattered against the obsidian floor, skidding away from my feet. I turned. The eternal crystal throne stood elevated at the far end of the hall, suspended above the floor on arcs of refracted light. I had seen it before from a diplomatic distance, remote, untouchable, mythic. Now it was empty. She was descending. Queen Saralyra of the Valkyrian stellar dominion stepped down from the throne platform, each movement deliberate, measured. Her robes were not fabric, but something alive with luminescence, woven strands of condensed stellar energy that trailed behind her like a living nebula. Her skin held the faint sheen of polished silver. Her eyes shifted between deep amethyst and molten gold as light bent subtly around her form. The air changed when she moved. Heavier. Charged. Every Valkyrian present remained kneeling, including Vareth, whose forehead now pressed against the floor he had expected to stain with my blood. I alone was still standing. Not by courage this time. By shock. She walked toward us. The hall parted before her. When she stopped in front of me, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not awe. Recognition. "What is your name?" she asked. Her voice was softer than I imagined. It carried effortlessly to the farthest edges of the hall without rising in volume. "Mason Cole," I managed. She repeated it once, tasting the syllables. "Mason Cole of Earth." Behind her, the kneeling commanders remained motionless. I could feel their fury without seeing their faces. "You were instructed to kneel," she said. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And you refused." "Yes." "Why?" "Because pride would sound childish. Because diplomacy would sound cowardly. Because survival would sound selfish." So I told her the truth. "Because if I kneel here, today, then every human who stands after me will kneel deeper." Silence swallowed the chamber. Her eyes shifted, fully gold now. "You would accept death," she said. "To deny a gesture?" "It isn't a gesture," I replied. "It's a precedent." A faint intake of breath rippled through the court. Vareth dared to raise his head slightly. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, "the rite preserves hierarchy. It reminds emerging species of their—" Saralyra raised one hand. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. "Without looking at him," she said, "you would spill blood in my hall for the sake of reminding a guest of his place." He defied imperial protocol, Vareth insisted. Before witnesses from 12 systems. To allow this would Allow what? She asked quietly. Courage. The word landed heavier than any accusation. She stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see faint constellations moving beneath her irises. You stood alone, she said. Unarmed, outmatched, unprotected. Yes. And yet you remained upright. I did not answer. She turned then, finally facing the assembled empire. The hall felt smaller beneath her gaze. For 50,000 years, she said, the Valkyrian dominion has ruled this sector through strength, through superiority, through certainty. No one moved. We have demanded submission from species we deemed lesser. We have called it tradition, order, stability. Her voice did not waver. But what is strength if it fears dignity? The crystalline pillars brightened. Varitha's hands tightened against the floor. Rise, she commanded. The nobles stood as one, heads bowed, eyes lowered. I remained where I was. She looked at Varith. You would have executed him. For the preservation of imperial authority. And what authority is preserved by killing a diplomat for standing? Varith said nothing. Then she did something no one expected. She walked past her highest war commanders, past her fleet admirals, past the grand strategists and ancient nobles whose bloodlines predated human civilization. She stopped at my side, and before the entire empire, she extended her hand toward me. A subtle gesture, yet the hall reacted as if struck by lightning. Mason Cole of Earth, she said clearly, you will stand. My throat tightened. I am standing. A flicker, almost amusement, crossed her expression. You misunderstand. She turned to the assembly. This human envoy displayed the one quality no throne can manufacture. She looked back at me. Conviction. Her hand did not waver. Gasps rose from the crowd. Varitha's composure fractured for the first time. Your Majesty, to elevate a human above decorated commanders. I elevate no one above you, she said calmly. I choose. Silence detonated across the chamber. For a Valkyrian queen, the word carried weight beyond politics. She stepped closer, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. Before the entire empire, she continued, her voice resonating through crystal and light. I declare Mason Cole under my personal authority. The words spread outward through the hall's resonance systems, broadcasting automatically across imperial networks, across worlds, across fleets, across systems. Her next sentence would become legend. I choose this human over fear. The phrasing was precise, but the meaning was unmistakable. She had chosen me, not as consort, not yet, but over her generals, over her enforcers of tradition, over bloodshed. The Dominion did not gasp this time. It fell utterly silent. I felt 100 calculations shifting at once. Political, military, cultural. Varitha's knuckles whitened. Your Majesty, he said slowly. This will be interpreted as weakness. Sarah Lyra's eyes flared gold. Then let them learn what true strength looks like. She turned back to me. You will not kneel on Velaris Prime, she said quietly. Not today. Her hand remained extended. After a moment's hesitation, aware of every eye in the Empire watching, I took it. Her skin was cool, but not cold. When our hands touched, the crystalline pillars brightened again, resonating with a harmonic tone that vibrated in my bones. A connection, not mystical, not yet, but undeniable. She did not release my hand immediately. Instead, she faced her commanders one final time. Tradition, she said evenly, evolves. Then, without another word, she turned and led me away from the Grand Conclave Hall. Behind us, the Valkyrian stellar dominion stood in stunned silence. The rite of submission had ended, and something far more dangerous had begun. If you've watched this far, then this story is really interesting to you. Please confirm it by clicking like under this video. It doesn't cost you anything, but it will help me understand what story to publish for you next. Write in the comments who the alien woman in this story looks like, and who you would like to see in the next one. Let's move on. I had expected interrogation, political briefing, strategic positioning, a controlled explanation designed to contain fallout. Instead, Queen Sarah Lyra led me upward, not through corridors any diplomatic envoy had ever walked, but through passages that seemed to shift around us. Walls of living crystal parted at her touch. Floors dissolved into bridges of refracted light. The architecture of Velaris Prime was already beyond human comprehension, fractal, fluid, dimensional, but this part of the palace felt personal. We ascended beyond the Grand Conclave levels, beyond the council tiers, beyond the command spires. Where are we going? I asked. To somewhere that does not belong to the Dominion, she replied. That sounds politically impossible. It is. We stepped through a final archway of pale violet light, and gravity seemed to change. The astral garden opened around us. It was suspended above the capital spires of Velaris Prime, but above did not feel like a sufficient word. The city glittered below like a crystalline ocean, yet overhead there was no ceiling, no dome, no projection field, only stars, real stars. Velaris Prime orbited twin suns, yet here the sky had been altered, space peeled open, revealing distant constellations in impossible clarity. Bioluminescent flora grew in slow spirals around floating platforms of translucent stone. Silver streams flowed upward instead of down, branching like veins of liquid starlight. The air felt lighter, cleaner. You can breathe comfortably, she said without looking at me. The atmosphere here has been recalibrated for human physiology. You were planning to host humans? I asked carefully. I was hoping, she said. That word lingered between us. She released my hand only once we reached a curved bench grown from living crystal near one of the rising silver streams. Sit, she instructed gently. This was not a throne, not a court, no guards, no witnesses, only us and the sound of distant harmonic resonance from the city below. I sat opposite her. Up close, the light beneath her silver skin shimmered faintly, like a contained aurora. Her eyes were no longer molten gold. They had settled into deep violet, softer now. You understand what happened in the conclave, she said. It wasn't a question. I understand that I just destabilized centuries of imperial ritual. You did more than that. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands in her lap. You forced my court to confront something they prefer to ignore. And what is that? She studied me for a long moment before answering. That humanity is not inferior. The word carried no contempt in her voice. Only analysis. Your species has existed in interstellar awareness for 8 of your years, she continued. A fraction of a blink to us. And yet you have advanced at a rate that unsettles the Dominion. Unsettles. I repeated. Terrifies, she corrected calmly. I hadn't expected honesty. We are volatile, she went on. You rise through chaos. You fracture and reform. You war against yourselves and then build civilizations from the ruins. It is disruptive. That's a polite word for dangerous. It is a respectful word. The silver stream behind her pulsed softly. My advisors argue that humanity must be constrained, she said. Limited access to advanced technologies. Restricted military coordination. Managed expansion. I've noticed, I said dryly. A faint flicker of something crossed her face, almost amusement. But you disagree, I said. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she rose and stepped toward the edge of the platform. The city lights far below reflected in her eyes. For 743 years, she said quietly, I have ruled the Valkyrian stellar dominion. The number hit me harder than I expected. You don't look ancient, she offered. I was going to say tired. That earned a small exhale that might have been a laugh. We measure time differently, she said. To us, your entire recorded history is recent. And yet you stopped my execution. Yes. Why? She turned fully toward me. Not queen to envoy, woman to man. When you refused to kneel, she said slowly, you did not posture. You did not threaten. You did not bargain. I wasn't in a bargaining position. You chose consequence over compliance. Her gaze held mine steadily. That is not common among my people. You command fleets that can erase civilizations, I said. You call that weakness? She shook her head faintly. It is not weakness I speak of. It is authenticity. The words sounded strange in her voice, ancient and newly discovered at the same time. My court speaks in calculated phrases, she continued. Every gesture measured. Every expression filtered through strategy. Even loyalty is often transactional. And you're exempt from that? I asked. A long pause. No. The admission was quiet. I have not been addressed without agenda in centuries. The garden's bioluminescent plants pulsed softly around us. And today, she said, you looked at me not as a monarch, not as a threat, but as someone capable of choosing. You were, I replied simply. Her eyes shifted slightly, violet bleeding toward gold. You are either very brave, she said, or very unaware of the danger you stand in? Probably both. That time, she did laugh. Soft, surprised, almost unfamiliar with the sound. The stars above flickered in reflection. You think I chose you out of impulse, she said after a moment. I think you chose stability over bloodshed. No. Her gaze sharpened. I chose you because you reminded me of something my dominion has forgotten. And what's that? She stepped closer. Risk. I felt it then, the subtle shift in proximity. The charged awareness. Not political, not strategic. Personal. You are temporary, she said, not cruelly. Your life will burn bright and brief compared to mine. I'm aware. You will age. You will weaken. You will die while I remain. The words were factual, not emotional. And yet, she continued, your species loves fiercely, creates recklessly, challenges inevitability. We don't have the luxury of waiting, I said. Her gaze softened. No, you do not. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't empty. You asked earlier why I stopped the rite, she said. Yes. She moved closer still, close enough that I could see the faint shimmer beneath her skin responding to the bioluminescent glow. Because when you refused to kneel, you were not defying me. I was defying tradition. You were refusing erasure. That landed. And I realized, she said quietly, that I no longer wish to preside over a system that demands dignity as tribute. The admission carried weight. You could have issued reforms without pulling me into it, I said carefully. Yes, she agreed. But that would have been safe. The stars overhead seemed brighter now. You did not choose me over your generals, I said. She held my gaze. I chose evolution over stagnation. A pause. And I chose you over fear. The air between us felt thinner. This was no longer about diplomacy. I'm not naive, I said slowly. Your court won't accept this easily. They will resist. They may escalate. Yes. And you're prepared for that. Her eyes turned fully gold. I have ruled through rebellions and border wars, she said evenly. I am not afraid of opposition. I studied her for a long moment. You're afraid of something, I said. Her expression changed. Not defensive, vulnerable. Yes, she admitted. What? That I will lose myself to eternity. The answer was unexpected. My lifespan, she continued, allows me to endure centuries of solitude, to witness empires rise and decay, to remain constant while everything else burns out. And that's a burden. It is a weight. She stepped even closer. When you stood in that hall, Mason Cole, you reminded me what it feels like to burn. My pulse quickened. This is dangerous, I said quietly. Yes. For both of us. Yes. And you're still standing here. She reached out, slowly, and placed her hand against my chest. Not seduction. Not command. Contact. I am tired of ruling without being seen, she said. And I am tired of representing humanity as a negotiation point, I replied. Her lips curved faintly. Then perhaps, she said, we begin with honesty. The city below shimmered. The astral garden pulsed softly around us. And for the first time since arriving on Velaris Prime, I did not feel like an envoy. I felt like a man standing at the edge of something irreversible. Neither of us knew yet how violently the Dominion would react. But in that suspended garden above the stars, something shifted. Not alliance. Not yet. Connection. And the Empire would not tolerate that for long. The first warning came as silence. Velaris Prime was never silent. The capital of the Valkyrian stellar dominion vibrated with harmonic resonance at all hours. The low-frequency hum of crystal engines, the distant song of energy conduits, the subtle chorus of bioluminal flora woven into the city's architecture. Even in the astral garden, suspended above the spires, there was always a pulse beneath perception. That night, it stopped. Saralara and I had been seated beside the rising silver stream, speaking in low voices about Earth's fractious governments and Valkyrian succession rituals, a conversation that would have destabilized half the conclave if overheard. You do not centralize authority, she observed. We argue until someone gives up, I said, usually out of exhaustion. That sounds inefficient. It is. It's also human. A faint flicker of gold danced through her eyes. Then her expression shifted. Mason. The word was sharp now. What? She stood abruptly. The bioluminescent plants dimmed. The silver stream faltered mid-ascent. That's silence, she said quietly. It is not natural. Before I could respond, The archway behind us dissolved. Not gracefully, not in response to her touch, but violently, shards of refracted light scattering like shattered glass. Armed Valkyrian sentinels poured into the garden. Not ceremonial guards. Combat units. Their armor was matte black instead of radiant silver. Their pulse rifles were charged, humming at lethal intensity. "Your Majesty," the lead sentinel said, kneeling only halfway, a breach of protocol in itself. "By order of the High Council, you are required to submit to medical stabilization." Sarah Lyra's spine straightened. "I require no stabilization. The atmospheric variance earlier today has triggered irregular neural resonance patterns." "That is a lie," she said flatly. I stepped slightly forward. "On what grounds?" 2 rifles shifted toward me instantly. The sentinel's gaze flicked in my direction with open contempt. "The human remains under investigation for destabilizing Imperial unity." Sarah Lyra moved in front of me without hesitation. "You will lower your weapons." There was the faintest pause. Then, they did. But not fully. "This is not a request, Majesty," the sentinel said carefully. "Grand Matron Velaris has authorized protective sedation." The name landed like a fracture in crystal. Velaris, ancient, influential, architect of half the Dominion's internal policy. Sarah Lyra's eyes flared gold. "Velaris has no authority over my physiology." The High Council voted unanimously. Without my presence. A beat. Yes. That was enough. The silver beneath Sarah Lyra's skin brightened. "You will leave," she commanded. And for a moment, I thought they might. Then something changed. A faint shimmer in the air. A subtle distortion, barely visible. Sarah Lyra staggered. It was slight, but I saw it. Her hand lifted toward her temple. "What have you done?" she demanded, her voice lowering. The sentinel's expression did not change. The toxin was introduced through harmonic frequency modulation during the conclave assembly. My blood ran cold. The pillars, I realized aloud. The crystalline pillars that had resonated when she spoke. They adjusted the vibrational spectrum. The sentinel continued. "A mind-dampening agent tailored to Valkyrian neural matrices." Sarah Lyra tried to straighten. For a second, she did. Then her knees weakened. I caught her before she could fall. Her skin felt colder than before. Not lifeless. Suppressed. "You will not," she began, but her voice faltered. "This is for the preservation of the Dominion," the sentinel said evenly. 2 guards stepped forward. I moved between them and her. "You touch her," I said quietly, "and Earth will consider this an act of war." One of them laughed. "Earth." The word was almost pitying. "Remove him," the sentinel ordered. They moved fast, even faster than I anticipated. Valkyrian combat units did not rely on brute force. They moved with calculated precision. A shock baton struck my ribs. Pain detonated through my chest. I hit the crystalline floor hard. Through blurred vision, I saw Sarah Lyra trying to rise again, her eyes no longer gold, but dulled violet. "Mason," she breathed. It wasn't a command. It was fear. That terrified me more than the rifles. They lifted her. Not gently. Efficiently. Her luminous robes dimmed as if reacting to her weakened state. "You cannot." I tried to push up. A pulse rifle discharged. Not lethal, but concussive. The blast threw me backward into the base of a crystalline arch. The astral garden trembled. Bioluminescent plants flickered erratically. The sentinel approached me slowly. "The human is to be contained," he said. "Grand Matron Velaris has prepared a tribunal." "On what charges?" I demanded through clenched teeth. "Contamination." The word echoed. "You believe she chose you freely?" He continued, almost conversationally. "You were temporary, disruptive, incompatible with Imperial longevity." Sarah Lyra tried to speak again. Her lips moved. No sound emerged. The toxin was working. They began to withdraw through the fractured archway. I forced myself to stand. "Sarah Lyra," I shouted. Her eyes flickered once, briefly gold, then dimmed again. The last thing I saw before they dragged her from the garden was her hand reaching weakly in my direction. Then the shock field hit. Darkness swallowed me. When I woke, the air was colder. Not the controlled atmosphere of the astral garden. Not the harmonic hum of the Capitol spires. This space absorbed light. Crystalline walls, yes, but darkened. Opaque. Ancient. Restraints bound my wrists. Across the chamber stood a semicircle of Valkyrian nobles. Unarmored. Robed. Watching. At their center stood Grand Matron Velaris. Her skin was deeper violet than Sarah Lyra's. Her eyes did not shift in color. They were frozen amethyst, sharp and calculating. "So," she said calmly, "this is the human who believes he can stand beside a queen." I pushed myself upright despite the restraints digging into my skin. "Where is she?" Velaris tilted her head. "Recovering. You poisoned her. We stabilized her. With a neural suppressant. With necessity." She stepped closer. "Your species has existed in interstellar politics for less than a decade," she said. "You presume to destabilize 50,000 years of governance. I refused to kneel. You refused hierarchy." She circled slowly. "Do you understand what that act has done? It exposed weakness in your system." Her gaze sharpened. "It exposed vulnerability in our queen." There it was. Not politics. Fear. "You think I manipulated her?" I asked. "You are temporary," she repeated. "Ephemeral beings create emotional volatility in long-lived rulers." She chose me. She was influenced. She was honest. Velaris stopped in front of me. "She has ruled 7 centuries without emotional compromise." Maybe that's the problem. A ripple of irritation passed through the gathered nobles. "You presume to lecture the Dominion on governance." "I'm telling you she's not a throne," I said. "She's a person." Velaris' expression hardened. "She is the Dominion, and you're terrified she'll change it." Silence. "Then, she will wake," Velaris said coldly, "believing your removal necessary for stability." "You're lying. She will be told you fled. She knows I wouldn't. She will be told you feared consequence." I leaned forward as far as restraints allowed. "You underestimate her." Velaris studied me for a long moment. "No," she said quietly. "I do not." Her gaze shifted to the nobles. "The decree will be drafted by morning. Humanity's diplomatic status will be suspended pending review." My pulse spiked. "You can't isolate Earth over this." "We can." The chamber darkened further as the walls absorbed more light. "You will be executed," she said calmly. "Your death will be attributed to environmental miscalibration." "And she'll believe that." Velaris paused. For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Not doubt. Regret. "She will grieve," she admitted. "But she will endure. She deserves a choice. She cannot afford one." The restraints tightened slightly. "I offered you exile," she said. "Leave Velaris Prime quietly. Return to Earth. Allow the illusion of stability." "And if I refuse?" Her voice did not change. "Then you become a necessary sacrifice." The words hung in the dark chamber. Sacrifice. Not execution. Not murder. Political correction. I closed my eyes briefly. When I opened them again, I met her gaze directly. "I choose her." Velaris nodded once. "Then you choose death." She signaled. A blade, ceremonial, humming, was brought forward. And somewhere deep within the capital of Velaris Prime, the eternal crystal throne sat occupied by a queen fighting through poison. The Dominion believed they had neutralized instability. They had no idea what they had awakened. The blade rose. It wasn't the same ceremonial weapon from the Conclave. This one was older, darker, its crystalline edge pulsing with a low, predatory vibration. Execution, not ritual. 2 guards forced my shoulders back against the restraint frame. The metal wasn't metal at all, but grown crystal, responsive to Valkyrian neural command. I tested it once. It tightened instantly, cutting circulation at my wrists. Grand Matron Velaris stood a few steps away, hands folded, expression carved from amethyst. "You could still leave," she said quietly. "Not without her. She will recover. And wake up to find me dead. She will wake to stability. Built on lies." Her gaze didn't waver. "Empires are built on necessary illusions." "Then maybe it's time yours cracked." A faint murmur rippled through the watching nobles. The executioner stepped forward. The blade's hum intensified. I thought about Earth. About oceans I'd probably never see again. About how absurd it was that refusing to kneel had brought me here, chained in a shadow chamber beneath an alien capital. And about Sarah Lyra. About the way her eyes had turned gold when she spoke of evolution instead of fear. If this was the cost of standing beside her, then so be it. "I choose her," I said again more quietly. The blade began its descent. The wall exploded. Not shattered, dissolved. White gold light flooded the chamber so violently that even the dark crystal walls recoiled. The executioner screamed as his weapon vaporized mid-swing. reduced to scattering motes of refracted dust. The guards were thrown backward as if struck by gravitational force. I squinted through the brilliance, and she stepped through it. Sarah Lyra, but not the composed sovereign of the conclave, not the reflective woman of the astral garden. This was the queen of the Valkyrian stellar dominion unbound. Her silver skin burned with internal luminosity like a contained star. Veins of light traced beneath the surface in branching constellations. Her eyes were no longer gold. They were supernovae. The air around her crackled. Grandmother. The word hit like a thunderclap. Every noble in the chamber dropped to their knees. Even Velaris, though she did not bow her head. The toxin should have suppressed your executive resonance, Velaris said evenly, though strain edged her tone. It did, Sarah Lyra replied. Her voice layered over itself, harmonic, resonant, immense. For 6 minutes, she walked forward. Each step fractured the dark crystal floor beneath her. You engineered a neuro-dampening field keyed to my conclave resonance, she continued. You underestimated my capacity. It was for your protection, Velaris said. You abducted my chosen. The word chosen sent a ripple through the kneeling nobles. The restraints around my wrists shattered without her touching them. I stumbled forward slightly, catching myself. She reached me in 3 strides. For 1 heartbeat, the fire in her eyes dimmed. Mason, she said softly, I'm still here. Her hand rose to my jaw, turning my face slightly to assess the bruise forming there. A flicker of something raw crossed her expression. Then she turned back to Velaris. You poisoned me. For the Dominion. You attempted to execute him. For the Dominion. You intended to fabricate his departure. For your sake. The last words carried genuine conviction. Sarah Lyra's light intensified. For my sake, she repeated. Velaris rose slowly, despite the energy pressing against her. You are 7 centuries old, the matron said. You have ruled without compromise, without weakness, without entanglement. This is not weakness. It is attachment to a being who will be dust before your reign concludes. The words struck harder than any weapon. Sarah Lyra did not flinch. I am aware of his mortality. Then you are choosing grief. I am choosing truth. The chamber vibrated. You will outlive him by millennia, Velaris pressed. You will endure the loss. Again. Silence. Then, softly. I have endured 700 years of isolation, Sarah Lyra said. Do not presume to lecture me on endurance. Her light dimmed slightly, not in weakness, but in focus. When he refused to kneel, she continued, he did not defy me. He affirmed himself. She stepped forward. I have ruled through fear of destabilization, through calculated distance, through strategic detachment. Her gaze swept the kneeling nobles. And what has it yielded? Stability without vitality. Power without connection. Velaris' jaw tightened. You risk civil fracture. I risk evolution. She extended her hand. To me. In front of them all. Mason Cole. I stepped beside her. My lifespan is brief, I said quietly. But it's mine. And I accept it, she said. She turned to the assembly. Hear me. The walls brightened in response to her authority. I love him. The declaration detonated through the chamber. Not whispered. Not private. Proclaimed. Velaris' composure fractured for the first time. You would bind yourself to impermanence. Yes. You would reshape imperial policy for sentiment. For partnership. Her hand tightened around mine. I will not confine humanity. I will not suppress what I do not control. The Dominion will not rule through fear of potential. You endanger our supremacy. Supremacy without growth is decay. The words resonated through the chamber's crystalline structure, broadcasting automatically through palace networks. Across Velaris Prime. Across the Dominion. Velaris stared at her granddaughter for a long moment. You will regret this, she said quietly. Perhaps. Sarah Lyra's voice softened. But regret is the price of choice. Guards entered, loyalists this time, their armor radiant instead of matte. They moved to detain the conspirators. Velaris did not resist. As she was led away, she looked at me once. Not hatred. Assessment. You will break her heart, she said calmly. I met her gaze. Maybe, I replied. But not today. When the chamber finally emptied, silence returned. But it was different now. Charged. Irreversible. Sarah Lyra's light faded gradually, returning to silver rather than starfire. She exhaled. For the first time since the wall had dissolved, she looked tired. "You should have let me die," I said softly. Her eyes snapped back to gold. "Never. You just declared war on half your council. They declared it first. You could have contained this quietly. I do not wish to contain it." She stepped closer. "I have spent centuries balancing factions," she said. "Calculating optics. Managing perception." Her hand rose to my chest again. "I am done pretending that detachment is strength." I swallowed. "You said I was chosen." Her gaze held mine steadily. "I meant it. This won't end with tonight. No. Your council won't forget. No. Your enemies will escalate. Yes. And I'm still mortal. Yes." A long pause. Then she rested her forehead briefly against mine. A gesture so intimate, so unguarded, that it felt more radical than her declaration of love. "I choose you," she said again. "Not as spectacle, not as politics, as truth." And in that fractured chamber beneath Velaris Prime, with the remnants of conspiracy still smoking around us, the Queen of the Valkyrian Stellar Dominion made her choice irreversible. The Empire would either evolve, or it would break, but it would never be the same again. They called it impossible. Not quietly, not behind closed doors, but openly, across council chambers and fleet networks and academic forums throughout the Dominion. A binding between a Valkyrian queen and a human. Not alliance, not treaty, union. The crystal sanctum of Valkyria had witnessed coronations, war decrees, and succession rites spanning 50,000 years of imperial history. It had never witnessed this. I stood at the threshold of the sanctum 3 weeks after the chamber had exploded and Sarah Lyra had declared her choice before the Empire. 3 weeks of political tremors. 3 weeks of emergency conclave sessions. 3 weeks of Earth's diplomatic corps oscillating between disbelief and strategic panic. Ambassador Rhee had arrived in person from Luna Station. "This is either the greatest breakthrough in interstellar diplomacy," she told me in private, "or the prelude to catastrophic backlash." "Probably both," I'd replied. Now I stood beneath arches grown from living crystal that refracted starlight into cascading auroras across the sanctum's vast interior. The ceiling soared upward into translucent infinity. At its center floated the core crystal, a massive, ancient structure said to predate even the Dominion itself. 2,000 dignitaries filled the terraced tiers. Representatives from 47 member systems. Fleet admirals. Cultural envoys. Earth's delegation sat in the eastern quadrant. Humans in formal diplomatic attire that looked painfully fragile compared to the luminous robes of Valkyrian nobility. Every eye in the sanctum was on the central platform. On me. I had never felt more aware of my mortality. I wore ceremonial attire crafted by Valkyrian artisans in collaboration with human designers. A fusion of structured earth formalware and fluid luminous threads that adapted subtly to the sanctum's light. It was beautiful. It did not make me immortal. Behind me, Ambassador Rhee stood as witness. "You still have time to walk away," she murmured quietly. "So does she. She's a queen. And I'm human. That's what worries me." A harmonic resonance signaled the opening of the sanctum's northern gates. The chamber rose to its feet. Sarah Lyra entered. The core crystal brightened instantly in response to her presence. She wore woven starlight. Not metaphorically. Threads of condensed stellar plasma interlaced with crystal fiber draped around her form, shifting between silver and gold as she moved. Her crown had been altered, subtle earth blue crystalline inlays embedded among the Valkyrian star shards. Her eyes found mine immediately. Everything else dissolved. The sanctum felt smaller than the astral garden had. More political, more dangerous. But when she stepped onto the central platform beside me, the space felt steady. High Priestess Velmora, ancient, measured, neutral, raised her staff of resonance. "By decree of the eternal throne," she intoned, her voice amplified through harmonic channels, "we convene to witness a binding unprecedented in Dominion history." The core crystal pulsed once. Low, measured. "Queen Sarah Lyra of the Valkyrian Stellar Dominion," Velmora continued. "Do you present yourself willingly?" "I do," Sarah Lyra said without hesitation. Her voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. "Mason Cole of Earth," Velmora said, turning to me. The title hung in the air. "Do you present yourself willingly?" "I do." The core crystal brightened slightly. A murmur rippled through the tiers. Velmora continued. Understand that this binding is not symbolic. The core crystal does not recognize gesture without resonance. Should the union lack integrity, it will reject it. I had been briefed on that. The core crystal was not ceremonial decoration. It was the Dominion's oldest living structure, semi-sentient, attuned to Valkyrian neuroresonance patterns. No human had ever been tested by it. Sarah Lyra extended her hands toward me. I took them. Her skin was cool as always. Steady. Tradition states, Velmora said, that eternal binds eternal. A pause. This union challenges tradition. Silence stretched across the sanctum. Sarah Lyra spoke before Velmora could continue. Tradition evolves. Her gaze remained locked on mine. I bind not eternity to eternity, she said, but eternity to flame. The phrase spread outward through the chamber's resonance channels. Some nobles stiffened. Some leaned forward. The core crystal brightened. Velmora nodded once. Then speak the mutual declaration. Sarah Lyra did not look away from me. Mason Cole, she said, voice lower now, intimate despite the thousands present. You are mortal. I am. You will age. Yes. You will end before I do. Yes. A ripple of discomfort spread through the sanctum. And yet, she continued, I choose to bind my centuries to your decades. My throat tightened. My reign to your breath. The core crystal vibrated faintly. My turn. Sarah Lyra. I said carefully, aware that the sanctum recorded every word. You are eternal. For practical purposes, she replied faintly. You carry a dominion on your shoulders. I do. You will outlive me. Yes. And I choose you anyway. The words felt small compared to the architecture around us. But they were true. I choose not safety, I continued. Not longevity. Not immunity from grief. The core crystal brightened further. I choose partnership. A harmonic tremor passed through the chamber. Velmora raised her staff. Join palms. We pressed our hands together fully. The core crystal reacted instantly. Light surged outward, not destructive, not violent, but overwhelming. It flooded through me like electricity and memory combined. For a fraction of a second, I felt everything. Not just her power, her weight, centuries of decision, loneliness, strategic restraint, and beneath it, something luminous and fragile. Hope. The light did not reject me. It did not burn. It harmonized. The sanctum gasped as the core crystal shifted color, streaks of earth blue threading through ancient violet. Velmora's composure cracked for the first time. The bond is recognized, she declared. Her voice carried awe, by the core crystal and by the Dominion. Applause did not erupt immediately. The Valkyrian response to seismic cultural change was not celebration. It was assessment. Then, slowly, the first tier began to clap. Not thunderous. Measured. The second tier followed. Then Earth's delegation rose in full applause. The sanctum swelled. Sarah Lyra stepped closer. The formalities should have ended there. Protocol dictated distance. Composure. Regal dignity. She ignored protocol. Before the entire empire, before fleets and councils and interstellar observers, she pulled me into her arms. Not ceremonially, not strategically, personally. Gasps echoed. Valkyrian queens did not display affection publicly. It was considered destabilizing. She pressed her forehead briefly against mine. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For refusing to kneel. When she released me, the applause shifted. Not louder, warmer. The bond was no longer theoretical. It was visible. Velmora raised her staff again. Let it be known across all systems, she proclaimed, that humanity stands beside the Valkyrian Dominion. Not beneath. Beside. The phrase propagated instantly through Imperial broadcast channels. Across fleets. Across colonies. Across Earth. The sanctum doors opened to the outer plaza. Millions waited beyond. Sarah Lyra took my hand again. Ready? She asked quietly. Terrified, I admitted. Her eyes flashed gold. Good. We stepped into the light together. And for the first time in Dominion history, a human stood beside the eternal throne not as subject, not as envoy, but as equal. They didn't call it love at first. Empires rarely do. They called it the deviation, then the human anomaly, then, reluctantly, the Cole precedent. History eventually settled on something simpler. The Cole effect. The shift was gradual. Valkyrian fleet academies opened exchange programs with Earth. Human engineers were granted supervised access to Dominion crystal tech research. Trade corridors expanded. Joint exploration initiatives formed along contested sectors once guarded by suspicion. It wasn't instant harmony. There were protests, traditionalist factions, quiet attempts to undermine policy, assassination threats I was never fully briefed on. But Sarah Lyra did not waver. She ruled differently after the sanctum. Not softer. That word was too shallow. She ruled present. I saw it in the way she addressed her council. Less performance, more clarity. In the way she allowed debate instead of suppressing it. In the way she asked Earth representatives not what they could offer, but what they feared. And the Dominion responded. Slowly, uneasily, then undeniably. Human art began appearing in Valkyrian cultural forms. Earth's symphonies were adapted into crystal harmonic compositions. Valkyrian long-form strategic philosophy entered human military academies. We didn't merge. We influenced. And influence, I learned, is more powerful than domination. I aged. That part was inevitable. Valkyrian medical science extended my life beyond Earth norms, but it could not rewrite biology. My hair grayed. My reflexes slowed. Lines formed at the corners of my eyes. Sarah Lyra did not change. Not physically, but I saw her change in ways no chronometer could measure. She laughed more. She delegated more. She allowed herself to be seen, not only by me, but by her people. When the end came, it wasn't violent. No conspiracies. No rebellion. Just time. I lay in a chamber overlooking Velaris Prime's twin suns, their light refracting through the city's crystalline spires. Her hand held mine. Cool. Steady. You were right, she said quietly. About what? Flame is worth the burn. I smiled. I told you humanity was disruptive. You redefined my reign. You redefined my species. She leaned down, her forehead resting gently against mine. I will carry this forward, she whispered. You always do. My last breath wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with light. Centuries later, they still speak of the union of flame and eternity, of the queen who chose a human over her generals, of the empire that shifted not through conquest, but through connection. They teach it in Dominion academies as the turning point, the moment supremacy gave way to partnership. And somewhere in the endless span of Valkyrian time, Sarah Lyra still rules. Not alone, never alone, because even flame leaves warmth behind. And warmth, unlike empires, does not fade. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Write in the comments what moment in this story impressed you the most. And also check out the other videos that just appeared on your screen. See you in the next video.